Ferrari is introducing a big upgrade package in Austria aimed at fixing the inconsistencies that the SF25 showed in the first race in Australia. But after such a long period of waiting before a major upgrade is introduced to the car, could we see some big changes in terms of performance? And more importantly, is this the determining factor as to whether or not we'll see a Ferrari up front, as their focus has now shifted to 2026? The situation at Ferrari is looking very questionable to say the least, as the SF25 has turned out to be quite a big challenge to tackle for both the drivers and the engineers back in Maranello. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc have constantly called for solutions, but it seems like their calls have fallen on deaf ears. Fred Vasseur was adamant in his statements that the car doesn't need upgrades as much as it needs an understanding of its philosophy and unlocking its potential. But we've heard this so many times, and quite frankly, Ferrari is just lacking big upgrades, as admitted by Hamilton in Canada. The big package is coming in Austria, although it was believed that it's going to be distributed between this and the following Grand Prix in Silverstone. Sources close to the team have stated a belief that Ferrari won't waste time and will introduce all of the upgrades in Austria. The main areas that they've worked on are the floor and the rear suspension, and we are very curious to see whether the performance issues are going to be fixed heading into the Austrian GP. Vasseur himself confirmed these upgrades and sent a warning to his rivals: "We are not stopping here." Over the next couple of races, Ferrari is going to evaluate the performance of the car and whether or not it's worth continuing the development of the SF25. Now that the wind tunnel has been completely focused on the 2026 Challenger, it's highly unlikely that Ferrari has the championships as their priority in both categories. But with so many drivers up there fighting and stealing points from each other, you can never say never. Elaborating further on the upgrades for Austria, Vasseur said, "We will have an upgrade soon before the UK and perhaps another one a bit later. But honestly, today I think there is much more in the execution and what you are getting from the car than in the potential of the car itself. Now we are at the end of these regulations, and we all know that when bringing something on track, we are more speaking about hundredths than tenths." Although the focus on the 2026 car made the F1 world believe that Ferrari was giving up on this campaign prematurely, this is definitely not the case. The team's decision marks the beginning of work actively on track and in the simulator to improve the short-term competitiveness of the 2025 Challenger. Therefore, a decision to invest further resources for a car that ended its wind tunnel cycle is a positive sign, one that reflects the team's confidence in the project. Needless to say, the number one issue that the team has right now is the low fuel performance, or more precisely, the qualifying. We saw some extraordinary pace from the SF25, but most of that has been wasted in chasing other cars or recovering positions lost either by being too far behind from the start or a messed-up strategy from the team. If Leclerc and Hamilton can have a better shot at fighting for pole position or the first two starting rows of the grid, the narrative could change in their favor. And the first step towards this is the upgrades in Austria. In this race, the drivers will have one specific requirement from the car: not being forced to lift and coast during the race. It's a technique in which the driver is effectively saving the car by letting off the throttle earlier before braking to save fuel or cool the hybrid system. When this happens in key moments of the race, you'd understand why the drivers would be extremely dissatisfied and frustrated, especially when the problem becomes even bigger when the car is in ideal conditions to perform. The latter stages of the race always show Ferrari with a little bit more pace than usual. But due to Leclerc and Hamilton having to apply the lift and coast strategy, they've never been able to translate this potential into something more fruitful. According to Auto Action, this is the last step that Ferrari will take in terms of continuation of the work on the SF25, especially when it comes to the rear suspension upgrade. If it fails, then the team is going to instantly focus on 2026 and see what else they could take away from this year in order to help their futuristic project. The hope and the goal are clear: improve the problematic interaction that the rear suspension has with the gearbox, especially now that the drivers have proved that the SF25's front end is strong. The problem is that the rear end becomes too nervous when it comes to the exit of corners. Charles Leclerc has been very vocal about the issues that have plagued the car's performance in the past couple of months. When talking about this in greater detail, the Monegasque said, "I think none of us are satisfied with how it is going at the moment. That is clear. We came into the season thinking that we had chances to challenge McLaren and Red Bull in order to win the championship, and that has not been the case so far. McLaren has taken a huge step forward from last year, a lot more than anyone else. And if we compare ourselves to our competitors other than McLaren, it's not like we are having a shocking season." What has been noted with the Ferrari drivers is that usually before a race weekend, they have different opinions on the expectations from the race. Although Leclerc is not happy with the team's development and doesn't think they have what it takes to compete up front, Hamilton is on the opposite side of the river. The seven-time world champion said that in Austria, we might be looking for a surprise in terms of the competitiveness of the SF25. He also spoke about the adaptation process being the biggest challenge for him so far. Elaborating further on this, Hamilton said, "I think mostly just me adapting is the biggest issue so far, but I think the track in Montreal really highlighted the weaknesses of the car. I've never had a car understeer so much at low speed here, it just doesn't want to turn through turn 2 or turn 10. So yes, definitely not my most favorite weekend, but I hope the next one will be better. I don't really know about Austria. I mean, it's all medium and high speed, so I think we'll be a bit better, and I think the car's pretty good at high speed, so hopefully we'll be a bit stronger next weekend."